I'm wondering, we're hearing about a 3-month clean CR without the SAVE Act that the Speaker might put on the floor this week. If he does that, he's going to need Democrats like you. Would you support it?
Yeah, if it's clean. It can't have any riders that target, abortion rights or gay people or any number of, different groups that, unfortunately, some of my colleagues on the other side like to target. But if it's clean and it's a short-term extension of government funding, let's do it.
Well, I guess we'll all have to wait and see if that actually comes to fruition and how quickly it can do so with the deadline quickly coming here, Congressman. Of course, it is not just your duty as Congressman to be dealing with funding questions, but you also sit on a number of committees, including the Intelligence Committee. So if we could talk about what's happening in the Middle East now that we've seen this explosions that Israel hasn't claimed credit for of pagers and walkie-talkies in Lebanon, talking about a new phase of this regional war. How concerned are you about this being a whole new front that Israel is going to have to open?
I'm very concerned. We can't have an all-out regional war. I mean, as it is, we have at least 5 fronts at this point where Israel is dealing with different enemies, different adversaries, different foes, and opening another front on, with regard to Lebanon and Hezbollah, I think would be a bad thing. I think at the heart of the matter is getting to a ceasefire for hostages deal and humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. That is the #1 thing that we should all be driving toward. I think there has to be more intensive diplomacy, and quite frankly, I think other parties in the region need to exert their leverage to make it, come to pass.
Yeah. What are you hearing, Congressman, on the Intelligence Committee about this whole scheme to have exploding pagers and walkie-talkies in the hands and on the bodies of members of Hezbollah? We've obviously seen a lot of people get hurt, and a couple of dozen people now have died. Was this an attempt to prevent a wider escalation, to prevent a response from Hezbollah, or to draw them out?
I don't know exactly. I think that what is clear is that Israel, or I shouldn't say Israel, has claimed credit for it, but it appears that Hezbollah members have been targeted and they were asked to basically stand down on the northern front. They didn't, and then there was a second attack. Nasrallah has now come out and vowed revenge or retaliation. There's just tens of thousands of people on either side of the border who are basically displaced from their homes in Israel and in Lebanon. And so we have a situation where I respectfully submit we don't want an all-out war to erupt, because Hezbollah, unlike Hamas, has maybe more than 100,000 missiles. And so if they start raining these missiles on especially critical infrastructure in Israel, that's a very, very serious scenario, and one that could, prove catastrophic.
Well, especially when we consider that firepower, if you will, Congressman, does the threat of that kind of conflict Israel might have to face with a better armed proxy take away leverage from the United States and this administration as they are still trying to push for Israel to agree to a ceasefire with Hamas? What leverage can the U.S. exercise when Israel might be facing threats from multiple directions?
Well, look, we stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel. We have an ironclad commitment to aiding them, and they have, of course, the right to defend themselves. However, in this situation where you have, of course, an ongoing war in the Gaza with Hamas, you have Iran, you have the Houthis, you have militias in Iraq and Syria all targeting the Israelis. Do we really want an all-out conflict on the northern front? I respectfully submit the answer should be no. And so I think that this is kind of, I think, what the Israeli military would probably be suggesting as well. My biggest concern is Netanyahu. I don't understand exactly what his end game is. I would prefer to see, again, a ceasefire for hostages in the Gaza Strip, along with humanitarian aid. That's what we should be focused on.
I have to ask you for your view and from your perch as ranking member on the China Select Committee, Congressman, about the momentum that we're seeing in Congress now to counter China. We just came off of a week that was billed as China Week in the House and saw the passage of the Biosecure Act, blacklisting Chinese biotech companies. Of course, we saw the law on ban or divest TikTok. And I wonder what you see as coming next as we build this mosaic of legislation aimed at Beijing.
Well, it all depends on Beijing. If Beijing lowers its aggression economically, technologically, and of course, with regard to our national security and militarily, if they lower the tensions, they lower the aggression, then we can lower our countermeasures along with our friends, partners, and allies. However, if they continue to ratchet up tensions, such as in the South China Sea, where they're ramming Philippine ships, if they dump electric vehicles, for instance, around the world in a bid to undercut their competition and destroy their competition, then we're going to, have to protect our interests at the same time that we work with our friends and partners and allies. So that's really the scenario that we're looking at right now.
Congressman, in the committee, you heard testimony today from a number of individuals, including Anna Puglisi, about concern that the Chinese Communist Party is using law to silence critics. Is there a solution to that problem?
I think so. And just for your viewers' benefit, basically what's going on is that a lot of Chinese entities, CCP-affiliated companies, are sending cease and desist letters to various scholars, academics, dissidents, people who would criticize the Chinese Communist Party. And essentially, what ends up happening is that these academics and scholars know that in order to prove the truth of their allegations in defending against a libel suit, for instance, they would have to take discovery of those entities in China. And the Chinese national security laws prevent that discovery. So it's a one-sided situation where basically the Chinese are using the law as a sword against their opponents and as a shield to protect their interests. What I've said is we need to do at least two things. One, we need to have statutes in place that basically have, for instance, treble damages associated with these frivolous lawsuits that are filed by CCP-affiliated entities. And then secondly, I think that we have to, basically have a situation where if you can't take discovery on a Chinese entity because of their national security laws, that lawsuit should be tossed out of court. So those are some of the solutions, among others.